All right, welcome everyone. My name is Charlotte Lee. I am joining you today as the chapter director of the Philadelphia chapter of Startup Grind. My day job is chief of staff with 1776. Before we officially start, as questions come to mind as you are participating, drop them in that chat channel. I try to get to them as the conversation's going so that they are relevant, but I'll definitely try to get to them all by the end. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to join the Philadelphia Startup Grind chapter or your own local Startup Grind chapter, as I know people are calling in from all over today. It's a really extraordinary organization. So if you're not familiar, it's the world's largest community of startups, founders, innovators, and creators. There are actually millions of members in over 600 chapters in over 125 countries around the world. It's a very large organization. They bring like-minded and diverse individuals together to share stories and learn from one another through entrepreneurship and stories of entrepreneurship. And this program specifically is a fireside chat where we feature someone in a specific industry or in a specific region to highlight what's going on and share what their journey was. A little quick background on 1776, specifically because of our guest today. We are the nation's largest network of incubators. We are up and down the East Coast, and so excited, we are opening a location in Indianapolis in the new year in partnership with 16 Tech. I know we have some of our 16 Tech friends on the call. Hello. And so as we were closing out the year, we decided what better way to ingratiate ourselves to this new city than by featuring someone from Indianapolis. So I'm really thrilled to welcome Mariama Shaheed, who is the CEO and head of school at Global Preparatory Academy. Mariama, it says at Riverside 44. Can you tell us what Riverside 44 is?
So yes, and thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Starla, for the connection. But I will say, so Riverside 44 in Indianapolis, there are about 9 school districts, but the largest school district in the state, and in Indianapolis, of course, is the Indianapolis Public Schools. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a part of their innovation schools. And so when we founded Global Prep, Riverside 44 was a school that already existed. And so like many big cities, the schools have numbers. And so even though we came in with a different program, we still know what was there before us. That's why we always say at Riverside 44, because it acknowledges what was there before and what is here today.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think my charter school, I think we were in PS 194.
You know how it goes, yeah.
PS, public school, a very official title.
Oh, yes, oh, yes.
Well, Mariama, I always like to dig in and I ask our speakers to give their Wikipedia background. If you had a Wikipedia page, I'm so curious, how would it read? Tell us a little bit about your early life, your education, and kind of what brought you to where you are today. I know you were an educator in the public school system. So curious kind of then what sparked this idea to have, to jump into the world of entrepreneurship and start your own venture. So tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah. So I am from Indiana. I was born in Southern Indiana, but moved to Indianapolis when I was 5. And so I have been reared in Indianapolis my entire school life. So I was one of 4 girls, and without going too much into detail with that, I will share, I start off with that because I think the foundation of how I was raised in Indianapolis really nurtured my desire to become a teacher. And ultimately that was my goal. I never wanted to be a principal. I never wanted to open a school. But I went to Butler University, which is a university in Indianapolis. And part of the partnership at Butler is that they put you to student teach in a district. I student taught half the year in the Indianapolis Public Schools and half the year in Pike Township, which is another district. I got hired there, and for 17 years I was there. I was a teacher there. I was an assistant principal. I was a principal there. And it was about, 2-3 years into the principalship that it was really clear that as a district principal, I was moving forward the vision of the superintendent. I respect and appreciate the bureaucracy and the way it's all set up. However, at a certain point, that shoe just didn't fit anymore. So I saw things that my school needed, my community, my teachers needed, but the superintendent was very clear, like, this is what we're doing, and I need you to run the playbook. And so one of the things I saw that changed a lot in our district was we started having an influx of native Spanish-speaking students. And when I first came to Pike Township to teach, I think I had one student that spoke Spanish. By the time I left, 33% of the student body where I was principal were native Spanish speakers. So I went to my superintendent and I told him I had this great idea that we should have a bilingual school. I was fluent in Spanish because I had studied in high school and college. But what really made me fluent was going abroad and living language and culture in Mexico, in Puebla, in Mexico City, in Guatemala. And I had this great idea and I wanted to lead it. And he was like, yeah, we're not doing that. It wasn't like even submit your proposal. And so I really am grateful for that hard no, because it required me to find the yes that I knew that was needed in Indianapolis, a community I deeply cared about. It just wasn't going to happen there. And so the Mind Trust, which is an education nonprofit in Indianapolis, they support those educators that are entrepreneurs who have an idea and a track record of success to do something different. And so I went into a fellowship for 2 years. I lived everything that became Global Prep Academy, and then partnered to launch the school, which became Indiana's first bilingual charter school to open up, and that's a fact. And then specifically serving African-American and native Spanish-speaking students. It's a demographic you usually don't see in bilingual education, but it's the demographic that we proudly serve.
Amazing. And I like the very casual drop about the fellowship. This is something for the audience to know. Thousands of people have applied to this fellowship, and Mariama was selected. I believe a very small group, or maybe just 1 or 2 fellows a year. I don't think it's like a large cohort. Is this right?
Well, so I was an education entrepreneur fellow, and I'm one of 9 fellows who have had that opportunity since within the Mind Trust.
Well, I think that's really, I think that really speaks to your entrepreneurial spirit to have received that hard no and said, this is just an opportunity to turn. And so, yeah. Thank you. I'm going to go this way because I really believe in this idea and I know that it's worthwhile.
And what's interesting, I'll just say, Charlotte, is that teachers don't often think of themselves as entrepreneurs, but teachers are constantly innovating in classroom. And so as teachers, you make something out of nothing, you find a way to shift things around. So I think that entrepreneurial spirit lives inside of educators all the time. Indeed. But it's the courage that it takes to step out of the comfort zone, to step into a space that's very unknown. Yeah.
And for people who are on the call who might not be familiar, can you give a quick breakdown difference between public, private, and charter?
Yes. So, right. Well, yes. Okay. So traditional public schools, I think what most people are familiar with, this is the school that you're zoned to. This is the school that most of us who are probably on the call experience, the traditional public school. Then there are public charter schools. And I always say public charter schools because many people think that charter schools aren't public, that there's some kind of way that you test in, and that's just not what it is. So we are a public school, but we offer a different kind of program. So some charter schools offer STEM, some offer like ours, dual language. Some charter schools offer leadership and mentoring programming. So there are different, I think, flavors, but it allows parents who are many times low income opportunities and choice that are typically afforded just to those who have means. And so I think philosophically, I was a traditionally trained educator, so I was almost raised to hate charter schools. But once I did my own research, I'm like, well, hold on. It sounds like this gives choice to people who typically don't have it. And so I'm 100% for it.
Yeah. And what I learned in my time also twofold was, one, if you look into the history of schools in the United States, how they were founded, it really is established on a, like what a factory was. The idea of really literally cranking kids through the system because that is how funding was set up, that only if a child moves up a grade does that school receive the funding for that child, which is so backwards. I feel like they should get the resources to help the kid achieve how they should be, not just shuffling them through. Personal. So I found that to be very interesting when I learned that, and definitely I think the crux of what is maybe so wrong with education in America. But secondly, the charter schools, the thing that I absolutely loved is there is an extraordinary level of accountability for those educators, because there's no tenure with charter schools. You are not guaranteed to have this job just because you signed up 40 years ago to be an educator. You have to be top notch. You have to be living, the values of being a teacher for your entire career.
Well, and you also have to be accountable to the community that selects you. So if we think about, parents, when you have charter schools, parents can select to go anywhere. So if your customer service is not one where you're delivering on outcomes and you're providing an environment and space for kids and families to connect with the school, you lose the student. And that's really how it should be. It should be an open marketplace. Because I remember, even as a district principal, I didn't spend a lot of time and energy thinking about engaging the community. The kids came, nothing changed, and we kept on moving. Whether the kids came or not, you still had the same pay structure, the same staffing structure for the most part. And so you didn't even connect with the fact that you've got to be good for your customers in order for your customers to stay with you.
Yeah. Additionally, going back to that entrepreneurial mindset of teachers, I think charter schools really allow for curriculum to be malleable and updated based on what's happening in the world, based on different students' needs. Can you speak to that a little bit specifically for your school? How do your teachers prepare for a new year? Do you have we used to have like a 2-week long, everyone was required to come back early, and not just let's be cute and set up our classrooms, but like in-depth prep for the year. So what do you do at your school to prep?
So if I compare in the district, and the district that I came from, like many districts, has very high union participation. And so I remember, even as a new principal, I was told you have a day and a half to start the school year. I was a new principal. I mean, in a day and a half, you can't get anyone onboarded. But that was the way it was set up. And so in our school, we have 2 weeks of institute, is what we call it.
We call it institute as well.
Charter school, right? So we dig into curriculum, we dig into team building, we dig into our values and our mission and our clear why. Why are you here? Because the work is harder. And I've done both. So I can attest to the work is harder when you don't have all the additional support of district, et cetera. But we dig into that, and we also dig into setting our rooms up for success. And so it's not like the surface level PD, it's the deep professional development that prepare people to do really challenging work. And so that's one of the things I know. People who come have come from districts and come over, they're not used to that level of support in terms of to launch the year. But then also we control our calendar and school day, length of school day and length of school year too. So we have an early release on Thursdays. So our kids today left at 12:45, and then we're able to provide professional development in the afternoon every single week. I never could have done that at a district, because there would have been all this pushback that really focused on the adults instead of the children.
Indeed.
And so that alignment for me and for my team is exactly why I know this is the education space that I am thriving in.
Yeah. And I remember in our brief conversation previous, and in a little bit of researching you in advance of our conversation, one statement really stuck out to me is that you wanted to create a school for your daughter, really for a school that you believed in for your own children, for children who you loved even more deeply than the ones you already educated, which I know even from an administrative standpoint, it is so hard to not fall in love with every one of those children and just want to be their protectors and their guides forever. But specifically to create something worthy of your own child. Can you speak to that a little bit, and maybe what you were seeing that you were adverse to and said, this is not where I would send my child, and what you wanted to set up for her success?
Yeah. So it initially started for me when my daughter was in pre-K. And my daughter was in pre-K, and I'm an educator, trained educator. I could not find a school. And so I was visiting all these schools, and I knew there was something that I was looking for, but I couldn't put my finger on it. But no school really fed what I wanted for her. So I think that started my initial quest to name what it was that a school would have. And so I made the lazy move in her kindergarten and first grade year, and I just brought her with me to school. So she was with me. I was the principal, and I had my child in kindergarten and first grade with us. But there were some things that I didn't like in the school that I led. And it was a really intense focus on test prep, making sure kids were ready to pass the test. And I get it, because I've only worked in urban education, and we live and die by those test scores.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel right that there's a whole nother way of learning that excites kids that we just didn't have the space to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking for a school and wanted to create a school where it was, yes, the book learning, but what's the real world learning? And so being project-based, making sure that kids had multiple experiences outside of the classroom. So we have 6 field trips a year now. With COVID, things are totally different, but we had 6 field trips outside of the year where students would dig into whatever they were learning in the books outside. We brought people into the building to teach kids about real careers tied to what they were learning about. And then additionally, we brought in partners to give kids that well-rounded education, because our school and the schools I've always worked in were high poverty schools. Mm-hmm. And when we go to high poverty schools, kids don't have the same opportunities. So it was important to me that language immersion, mm-hmm. that African-American children who were poor could have bilingual education, that they could have violin lessons from the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra, that they could travel outside of the country and outside of the city, that they would visit colleges, that they would have those kinds of experiences that truly you usually see in suburban schools, but all kids deserve it because it's And so while our school opened with bilingual education in K1 and 2 when we first started, my daughter was in 3rd grade, going into 4th grade. So she couldn't take advantage of the school that I created. But I always look for the decisions that we make. Is this going to be something that I would want for my own child? Mm-hmm. And does it continue to be the vision for what kids need in education?
Amazing. Yeah, that real world exposure is so valuable. Again, it is kind of backwards for people who haven't experienced, for people who haven't seen it in real life. And I own that this was just like willful ignorance, but I was so taken aback when I would speak to some of my students in Harlem, and I would say something about an area in New York City. I'd say, oh, and I went to Central Park alone. I'd say, oh, and I popped into Central Park, and I had kids who were almost 15, 16 years old who said, I've never been there. And I was like,
I know.
You live blocks from Central Park and you've never been there, but it's because their world has a set of confines that people just are not aware of. The invisible walls that are kind of built up in their neighborhood of like, this is where you are and this is what you have access to. That are either verbalized to them or not. And they very clearly start to understand what society's boundaries are for them. And so to be able to provide them that knowledge and say, here, you have access to this.
You have access.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, the other piece to that is we have our staff, 40% of our staff are native Spanish speakers.
Oh, that's
coming from different countries. And providing that they're that mom in the classroom to the children. And so I think about the exposure that our children have now to Cuba and Venezuela and Mexico and Korea because of their educators. Mm-hmm. And you think about, children who typically don't even have a close relationship with someone that doesn't look like them. Yeah. Now they're nurtured by someone who doesn't even speak their same language. And I remember when our school first opened, and I would hear Black kids say to Spanish-speaking children, I don't talk to no Mexicans. I was like, well, hold on, wait a minute. We're talking about 5-year-olds. So you're hearing something in your world that doesn't align to what you could be if your beliefs were changed. And now to see our children and how they speak about one another and the culture of others. We have Dia de los Muertos celebration coming up in a week and a couple of days. And our kids my Black kids are already talking about, are we still going to paint our faces like the Catrinas? And so they're so into the culture now because it's a part of what our culture has become because of exposure. Yeah. And that's good for kids.
That's awesome. I could talk about education all day. I never knew how excited I was about education until I got into it. And then I was like, I want to talk about this all the time. Mostly because the disparities are astounding. They're astounding. Let me ask, I'm very curious about the idea of Spanish immersion and what that looks like. So what does the structure of a day look like for a kid? What are they getting exposed to? Are there subjects taught in different languages? I would love to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So our program follows a 50-50 model, which means half the day students learn through Spanish and half the day they learn through English. So different than the language classes that we had in like high school and college, we don't teach kids verb conjugation. We teach math through Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
We teach language arts through Spanish. And so that immersion experience allows students to learn the content through the language. So they halfway through the day, they switch. And so if you started your day in Spanish, you then switch teachers. So we have a 2-teacher model, and then you go to the other language. And the beautiful thing about it within the program is a strict language separation. So when you come into my class, if I'm the Spanish teacher, I'm not going to translate back and forth for kids. I'm going to just teach in Spanish, and I'm going to provide a lot of total response structures and let the children work with one another to provide that exchange of language, but the teacher becomes the language model, and that classroom environment is also the teacher as well. And the languages that we teach in Spanish are language arts. It's taught in both languages. We teach science and social studies in Spanish, and math is taught in Spanish as well. And half the day, like I said, with content, reading and writing is taught in English.
Awesome. I appreciate that you said from your own travels of being places, that's really how your own fluency, you really harnessed that. And I have to say from my own experience, being in places where it's not like just like I'm in school and I have to like memorize how to say a thing, right. By hearing it all day, that almost like osmosis learning, that's such a beautiful way to apply, education. Even if they're talking about numbers, you're now learning them in a different language. And I know on the school website there are some specific research-based backup about what it means, and also aspirational statements about what it means to be an immersion school. So what have you seen come out of utilizing this means of education? What kinds of successes or what kinds of data is there around the outcomes of this kinds of education?
Well, I think the thing that's a little bit scary about bilingual education, if I talk about the beginning journey of this process, the more research I did in those 2 founding years before we opened, I was like, oh my God, what the hell have I decided to do? Because it's so heavy. I mean, teaching is hard in and of itself. Mm. But the research shows that for bilingual education, it's a 7 to 10 year game. Mm. So when people want like these immediate payouts, that's just not how bilingual education works. So what we've already seen is that I remember when we first opened in year 1, there was this trepidation when it came to signing on for bilingual education. Trepidation from our Spanish-speaking families whose kids, they wanted to have better English than they had. So it's like, this sounds like it's going to set them back. And so there's a lot of like coaching and convincing. Mm-hmm. And then what they saw was kids would start to have a level of pride in language that their older children didn't have because they didn't have the bilingual opportunity. Yeah. And then in the beginning, I saw a lot of my Black families from Riverside, like, hold on, why do I want to do this? Mm. So again, a lot of coaching and convincing. But what we see now is there's this level of connection between the children and between the teachers and their love for language and enjoying that part of it. But we also see that there's a lag. There's a lag between the kids having proficiency in both English and Spanish because they're learning both at the same time. So there's this biliteracy zone that kids will go through before they get to a place where they've leveled out in both languages. Mm-hmm. And the biggest challenge right now as a staff is educating ourselves, educating families so they don't check out because they don't see what their neighbor's 3rd grade child is doing. My 3rd grader's not doing that. Is this the right thing? So that parent education piece is huge.
Yeah, and the parent involvement in general, I mean, in education across the board, it should be deep and robust and parents should feel involved. But I find with Progressive education, a word I actually hate using when it comes to education because, and really in so many things in our world, I feel like progressive, it has this like dirty connotation for people, but at its root, right, it's progress. It means forward. And why would we want to stay where we are when there's so much to gain in the future? That silly word progressive, but I have found that you're right. There's a lot of, there's a bit of a learning curve or an acceptance curve from the community when we first have to put that in. And remind me, your school is which grades? It is K through 12?
So we're pre-K 6 right now, and next year we add on 7, and we'll ultimately be pre-K. Yeah, we'll be pre-K 8 by the time we finish. And so we're at the process right now of identifying our partner school for high school. So kids can have a bilingual experience from pre-K all the way to grade 12 and graduate with the biliteracy seal, which you're seeing in California and in Utah and in other cities where they have more bilingual opportunities, but that's something that we want our children to achieve as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess probably not established yet since you're not up into those grades, but would that partner school, have you seen that there are programs in place? What we found a lot of our students struggled with is that we had created such a beautiful and warm and inclusive and growth mindset space that then they graduate high school and go to college and suddenly they were like, I don't know what I'm even doing. I don't know how to take notes. I don't know how to organize myself. And they did, but without that community, that family that they were with, they completely lost their sense of north. So do you have you seen programs like that kind of have that, either setting them up before they graduate and prepping them, or sort of transitional programs? I know we had like 2 alumni reps that would like travel around and make sure, freshmen in college were settled and knew what they were doing.
Well, and I'll tell you, my zhuzh is elementary school. So the whole high school world, I'm very excited about finding the right high school partner. Because I'm like, you have to know your limits. But we're looking for our high school partner to be an environment that has that, that's similar to our environment, about nurturing the whole child, meeting kids where they are, but super open to bilingual programming, because there's not right now a high school that exists for our program. So the opportunity that we're excited about is that our children will go from this small bilingual class of, we're probably gonna have about 38 graduates in 8th grade, to then cohort into high school, but be able to be around other kids and other teachers and other programs to propel them towards that independence that they'll need high school and beyond. Because it would worry me if kids only stayed in our bubble from K all the way up to grade 12.
Yeah, it can be a very difficult transition. Yeah.
I'm sure.
We did have a question, which was, how much did you have to invest to start your own charter school? And I'm not sure if you did have to, but I know just establishing a charter school is a whole extraordinary process unto itself. So I would love if you could share.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the reasons why I work in partnership with the Indianapolis Public Schools, which is IPS, why we're Riverside 44, is because it didn't require me to do any kind of fundraising. So because we're in partnership with the district, we went into a school that had been failing for the past 7 years. The district provides the building, the district provides transportation. And so that's about a $2.8 million investment annually, which allows us to focus on programming and not deal with any of the funding pieces that so many charter schools struggle with, because it's very difficult to stay afloat. So I fortunately didn't have that financial challenge.
And is it the same? My understanding from my experience was, again, going back to those test scores, which is just like, someday we will remedy that. This is the thing that everyone has to rely on. But we had to kind of show proof of concept to continue getting funding from the public school district. So, which is, the double-edged sword of like, of course we want our kids to test well, but like not everyone's good at standardized tests. Is that a reflection of a kid's growth? And I guess, especially for a holistic view of a child, the answer is no. Showing 2 test scores does not show the overall growth of the child. But is it similar in Indianapolis that you have to kind of prove concept, continue their funding?
Oh, well, to keep your doors open.
Yeah.
So we have two partnerships. The one is with the Indianapolis Public Schools, and it's a 5-year contract. So we're in year 5 for that to be renewed. And you have to show that kids are growing and that kids have been successful with this change. And then we also have a 7-year charter with the mayor's office. And in Indianapolis, the mayor is actually, it's only in Indianapolis where the mayor has authorization of charter schools. And so in order to stay open, you have to meet your goals with the mayor's office. So there are all these entities that we're responsible to, and we have to meet goals in order to stay open.
Yeah. Do you do district lunches as well? Do you use your food program through, or do you provide? Yeah.
And that's the thing. Right now, IPS is looking at becoming more of a district resource provider, if you will. We don't have to go with the lunch service, but we do. We don't have to go with their custodial services, but we do. And we could choose their professional development, so we don't. So it's deciding on what we want, what we don't want.
Yeah.
And it might be just because of what our programs are. And it's not that their things aren't great, but this is the direction we're going.
Indeed.
And so we're able to do that.
Yeah. I would be very interested to hear what sorts of examples of charter education or alternative education or progressive education. What other things have you seen that you hope continue to spread in our country? What concepts, what ideas have you seen that you think like, yes, this is the future of education and someday we will be in this space? Or what have you seen in other countries? Because there are extraordinary examples of education in other countries.
Right. I'll start really simple. I think one of the things that we're doing well in Indianapolis, and I know nationally there are a lot of districts and entities that look at what we're doing here in terms of district charter partnerships, because in so many places it's contentious. It's either you're with them or you're with us.
Yeah.
And what we've done in Indianapolis is pull the two together, because at the end of the day, you're serving children. I think autonomy is where it's at when it comes to public school education. When things are so centralized and everybody's got to serve the same meal to all the kids regardless, that's not the best way for education to be provided. And so I'm seeing that autonomy is a piece, the partnership piece is huge. And then I think there's also this focus on that social emotional learning and meeting kids at their heart before you can ever teach them.
Yeah.
And that's one of our core beliefs, that you have to touch the heart before you can touch the mind. And what we see now, especially even in COVID, it's how do you stop and assess where kids are before you can educate them? And that's especially important with children who come from really tough backgrounds. And so I think years ago it was fluffy. Now it's like everybody needs to do this in order to make a difference with kids. The other thing I'm excited about as an opportunity is the role that technology plays meaningfully with kids. I know that the whole one-to-one thing was popular years ago, and districts got all these computers and all kids had it, but it was really a babysitter. Teachers would put kids in front of computers and it would look good, but what was really happening? And especially with COVID and going hybrid, there's so many online resources that have allowed our kids to connect from different cities, different countries with these online pen pals. I'm teaching an online class right now because I needed the experience of like, what does this feel like? Is it really that hard? Yes, it's hard.
Yes.
But it's like these online whiteboards, and I can put my whiteboard up and then all the kids have their whiteboards, and you're able to provide in the moment feedback in a way that even in a classroom, you couldn't see 20 kids work at one time.
Yeah.
So I think those ways of using technology in a way that's meaningful for kids is something that we're continuing to, and educators are continuing to really dig into to be more effective for kids.
Yeah. I'm also curious, let's get really topical. There is a kind of a contentious debate about the idea of teaching our nation's history differently in the future, opening up and helping kids understand some real true historical information about our country and understanding its flaws so that we can continue to drive towards a more perfect union. Are you privy to this? Are you hoping to apply that? Have you seen some pushback in Indianapolis? What are you seeing in terms of, kind of recreating or revisiting perhaps what it is that we teach kids about where we all came from and how we got to where we are.
I think that's a topic everyone's talking about. But I think if we really take a step back, even we're having to recognize that we've been miseducated.
Mm-hmm.
And so to change the way you educate others, you first have to unpack your level of understanding because of the miseducation you received.
Big time.
And so I hear schools talk about being anti-racist and how do you have an anti-racist curriculum? And I am for it 100%. Hell, I posted it too. Let's go anti-racist. But the challenge is we've really got to unpack, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And what does your learning process need to be?
Mm-hmm.
And what's your mindset as an educator to make sure that whether you're serving all white children or serving children that are mostly minorities, what do you understand in order to better educate them? And educators need to get educated so that this can happen the way it needs to. Because I think there's a level of awareness that we've been miseducated, but how much are you willing to learn and where do you start?
Yeah.
Where do you start? So I know we've started by sharing articles, sharing resources. I'm very just careful not to share like, here are all the great things that Black people did. It's bigger than that. That's what we've been doing.
Yeah.
But beyond that, yes, it's Hispanic Heritage Month. What do we need to know in order to educate students on that, so we don't just have pretty signs up and put tags on our emails? It's bigger than that, and we've got to get smarter in order to do it well for our kids.
Yeah.
And that's real education needed.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. And I have been doing my own work as well, because I feel very much that way. I want to be able to speak as an informed human and talk about what is possible. But before I can do that personally, I have to know where my own gaps are, and they are huge. And I'm becoming overwhelmingly aware of them as time goes on.
Well, I think if you've been educated in the United States, regardless of your race, you have to recognize you got the gaps.
Big ones.
You got the gaps because we've been fed something for a reason.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, growing up in California, we learned about the history of the California missions. How they were built. I don't know if you're familiar. They're gorgeous buildings, all very much in classic old Mexican structure, with the beautiful tiled roofs and everything. And we learned about, these beautiful buildings, and then you get to make your own, you do your own little model, learn about the people that established them and how great this was. But we don't really dig into that indigenous peoples were ripped from their homes and forced to become Christians and live in the missions, what a strange thing to have to come to terms with, because that also means that you have to be teaching kids about evils and about conflicts, and about that stories get told often by the victors of those. And what does it mean to reflect so that we are not repeating history and that we are learning from it, That's really
true.
And I imagine sorry, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say to that point, I have always believed that parents are first teachers. Mm-hmm. And my parents, I was blessed to be raised in a home with my mom and dad. But when I was born, my parents had just left the Nation of Islam. Wow. So if you're familiar with the Nation of Islam, you know that it's it was very political organization at the time. But my parents left the Nation of Islam in 1975 to become Orthodox Muslims. Mm. But indoctrination had come from the nation. So as you can imagine, as they raised 4 little Black girls, there was a lot of the nation's teaching that they poured into us. We didn't even know it as such. Yeah. But one of the things that my parents had always said, as they educated us about what does it mean to be Black? What does it mean to be proud, Black and proud? One of the things that they always said is you cannot expect a man who didn't treat you right to teach you right. Mm. And so they made it incumbent upon themselves to make sure we understood, what does it mean? Why are you proud to be Black? What are the contributions that you must give in your community and have already been here? And so that indoctrination, I think, is a big part of how I rear my global prep kids, because it's that belief that you teach from a place of love, you teach from a place of empowerment. And if ever those two things aren't there, then there is a gap, mm-hmm. and we have to make sure that we provide it.
Mm-hmm. That's well said. All of that. Lovely. Well, I want to bring it back to our attendees. If you have any questions for Mariama, otherwise, I mean, she and I could just keep talking all the live long day. I'm into it. And I have just some fun rapid fire questions to kind of wrap us up, but definitely would love to hear if there's anyone there. And Mariama, I'm so excited that someday I'll get to Indianapolis and we can maybe meet in person.
I would love that. I would love it.
See your school.
Yeah, right now we don't have visitors, but
yeah, I know. We've been talking about how we're going to get out there and when we're going to get out there. And my boss and I are debating whether we're going to rent a car and just drive.
When is the right time?
I know. Yeah. I really want to make it. I know though that I've been from the side aware that numbers in Indiana, COVID numbers are still going up pretty substantially. So I don't want to, I also want to be mindful that I'm not bringing my East Coast self and trading in any way that could be detrimental to anyone. Of course, we want to, be good and safe.
I know.
But I'll get there. I'll get there. We'll do something. Yeah.
Right.
Do you do any entrepreneurial work with your students? Do you speak about entrepreneurship with your kids? Is there anything kind of aligned with that sort of innovation and entrepreneurial mindset?
That's a great question. We have not intentionally done that just yet. We do spend time, our project-based work and the development of projects based on what kids are learning. I think that's probably where the entrepreneurship most lives right now. One of the things a wise person told me when we first opened our school was take the vision and the book that you wrote for this charter and realize that it will likely be achieved in about 7 years. And if you think it's going to be achieved much sooner than that, then you'll be disappointed by yourself.
Yeah.
So we're inching towards what we aspire to be, and not yet there. And that piece isn't there yet.
Yeah. I'm also curious, again, this is just all from my own experience and I'm just fascinated by what else is applied. I would imagine you guys you do some character development. You are working to build holistically, beautifully developed kiddos. Do you have like a set of character or values that you really drive towards? Do you teach your kids and kind of speak to how they are applied in their day-to-day?
So yeah, the character piece has always been something that was very important to us, and the values. We were fortunate to find a curriculum partner that focused on that as well. Because I think that's one of the things when you try to start something new, if you think you're going to build everything, you're going to kill yourself. And so by finding the right curriculum partner, which for us is EL education, it comes out of Outward Bound and Howard University, Harvard University. And part of that curriculum, it focused on character development, leading through equity, and then high quality work. So those are three of our very deep beliefs that are also a part of the work that we do with the curriculum. The piece that I love is every day begins with crew. And this belief that we are all crew, we're not passengers.
Yeah.
And so being crew, we focus on what are the character traits that it means to be a good crew member? And then how do we call one another out lovingly if we're not good crew members? And then what are the social skills that also needed to be developed? And so even when we were remote with our kids, crew was part of the day. Even our staff meetings that kick off this today at 1:30, crew is how we kick off.
Yeah.
Because in order to move this boat forward, we have to be crew.
Yeah, I love that. We definitely did something like that in my last year there. We talked about crew. And yeah, I was in that homeroom. It was a little more of the like, how are we setting ourselves up for a successful day? How are we contributing? So good.
Oh yeah. And it should transcend school, because what we should be doing every day is preparing little humans to be amazing adults.
Right.
And so we have to pour into them in a way like, how does this show up when you're at a corporate job?
Yeah.
If you don't know how to be crew, we're seeing that people don't know how to be crew.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we can develop it.
I love that. Well, I'm going to take us through some rapid fire questions if we don't have anything else from the audience. These are just fun and light. What do you prefer? And let us put ourselves in a mindset that we are not in a global pandemic and we can freely move about the world without masks as I'm asking these questions.
Ready?
Do you prefer the beach or the mountains?
Oh, right now, beach.
Yeah.
It depends on how I'm feeling. I love the mountains too.
Yeah.
Went to Estes Park, fell in love. So yeah.
I just love the outdoors. On a long road trip, driver or passenger?
Oh, I'm a passenger.
Are you?
I'm a passenger on that crew.
I'm a driver on that crew. My husband and I clocked 7,000 miles this summer in a van, a camper van that we rented with our dog. It was the greatest adventure.
Sounds like it.
I think of those 7,000, I probably did 6 of those 1,000. I love driving. I'll drive all day.
I don't mind riding. We just did an RV trip with this whole COVID thing. We did an RV trip. It was our first time ever. Loved it.
Yeah.
And I drove 0 hours.
Which you also loved.
No minute. I know. Yeah.
What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
I am a cake batter girl.
All right. Like Cold Stone?
Mm-hmm.
I worked at Cold Stone once.
Oh, I couldn't have worked there because I wouldn't be sitting in this chair today if I hadn't worked at Cold Stone.
I put on a real quick 12 pounds in that job. Oh, it was so easy. Ice cream for lunch? Great. Ice cream for dinner?
Why not? Why
not? Is there a fictional character you really identify with?
No.
No,
I'm not a fictional character. I mean, I'm not a fictional character. I'm embarrassed to say I'm more of a reality show.
That's all right. Is there a reality show character that you love?
There are none.
There are plenty that you hope to not be like, I think.
Oh, yeah, so there are plenty that I hope to not be like. But no, I can't think of a fictional character. I'll think of one later. Sure, but.
This is a good question since I'll be needing to visit Indy soon. What's a local spot that you love to bring people to if they're new to the city or if you're meeting up with friends? What's like just you love to go to this place?
I love Mimi's Meatballs. And so it's located downtown Mass Ave. I love that you can eat outside, that they have a super simple menu where you can just choose your type of meatball, choose your sauce. The fried Brussels sprouts are everything.
I love fried Brussels sprouts.
I love it.
There's a spot in New York called the Meatball Shop. I think probably a similar thing. I also loved going there. Yeah, simple. It's like 5 kinds of meatballs, a couple of sides. And you're like, I'll eat here all day. I love that.
And you can go bread or no bread. So,
Nice. This will be interesting since you are a different kind of entrepreneur than we've had in the past in education. But what is something that you really love that has been automated or been brought into technology and you apply this thing in technology? And what's something that you hope would really never become fully automated?
Ooh. The thing I'm loving is this, the Google? It's kind of like the Alexa.
Mm-hmm.
I'm constantly saying, hey, Google, what time is it? Hey, Google, what's the weather? So I love the Google thingy. The thing I hope is never, the thing I don't care for are books on Kindles and textbook. I don't care for that. And I hate that those are how we educate our kids many times because it's easier to send them the PDF and whatnot. But I hate that, but it's become, that way. Something that I hope is not automated.
I mean, education. I hope there's always people teaching our children.
Well, yeah. You need
I don't know. We might head to a crazy place someday.
I don't think it's going to serve the kids who need a teacher the most, because I'll tell you this, the BCS calls that we had when kids were remote broke my heart.
Yeah.
Broke my heart.
Yeah. I was seeing so much of that. And we have a member company out of our Cherry Hill, New Jersey location. Her company is called Victim's Voice. And it's a lot about helping with domestic violence victims and making sure that they have a safe place to report things that are going on. But I similarly, when everything started, I was like, there are people who have a home life that is just not awesome for them. And they're having to stay in it and just steep in it now for months.
And don't know when it's going to end.
And they don't know when it's going to end. And that is
countdown to the first day of school. Like, I've only got 4 more days. And then it kept getting delayed. I was paying for them.
Yeah.
Paying for them to get out of there.
Yeah. Oh, the babies.
I know.
Well, that's really all I had for today. I just have so enjoyed this time. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to everyone who attended. Mariama, I hope that, I cannot predict what even sort of might go on for the rest of your school year, but I hope that you are able to find interesting and innovative ways to maintain that connectivity, to support your students. I think that you are doing something extraordinary. I hope that what you have built ripples out past Indianapolis into our whole country. I really think that, to quote one of my favorite shows, West Wing, I think education is the silver bullet. I think if we can fix that, it would have a ripple effect that would be insurmountable to anything else we've ever seen. It would change our entire country. So I praise you for doing the good work, doing the hard work, especially while we need it. Yeah.
Well, I'm blessed to do what I love every day. I've enjoyed our conversation, and I'll be back at it tomorrow.
Good. Yeah. Get back into it. And I know you have to get to your team meeting and your crew. So do it. Yeah. Everyone, thanks for joining us today. Looking forward to seeing you on another Startup Grind, I hope, in the future. I will tell you an exciting little plug, not next month, but December, we're actually going to be turning the tables, and I will be interviewing our CEO, Jen Mayer. So I hope everyone can tune in for that. She has a fascinating story, and I hope you can all tune in. Also, if you're tuning in and you're an entrepreneur and you are looking for services and resources to help your company grow, check out 1776. We've got lots of stuff, especially if you're in Indy. We are coming to you. Can't wait to be supporting that town. So thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. Be well, stay safe, and we'll talk soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye.